Good afternoon and welcome to Cambridgeshire County Council's Children and Young People's Committee. The County Council allows filming and photography at its public meetings, so please feel free to take pictures or share on social media during the meeting. Please, though, can everyone present turn their phones, laptops and anything else to silent or vibrate whilst the meeting is taking place. We have no fire alarm test scheduled for today, so if the alarm sounds, I will adjourn the meeting and we will leave the room by the side doors and use the external fire exit to the assembly point in the car park. I'd like to remind everyone present this meeting will be live streamed and a recording will be placed on the Council's website. The meeting will be adjourned every 2 hours for a short comfort break. Before we begin this afternoon's business, I'd like to welcome Sarah Callahan, the new Director for Education, to her first meeting of the Children and Young People's Committee. Welcome, Sarah. I'd also like to welcome John Young, who's recently taken up his position as Director of Education at the Church of England Diocese, I can get there, of Ely. He joins us today as the new representative on the committee for the diocese. We're required formally to co-opt John so that he can take full part in proceedings going forwards. So can I ask John briefly to leave the room so that the committee can vote on that co-option? Thank you, John. Sorry. Our committee members content to co-opt John Young as the Church of England diocesan representative in accordance with statutory requirements.
Agreed.
Agreed. Marvellous. Welcome back, John, formally to your position on the committee. Item one. Item one is apologies for absence and declarations of interest. Would the Democratic Services Officer report any apologies, please?
Apologies received from Councillor Atkins and Councillor Hoy, substituted by Councillor Costello.
Thank you. Does any member wish to declare any disclosable pecuniary interest or non-statutory disclosable interest this afternoon? Nope. In which case we will move on to the minutes of the meeting on the 25th of June 2024. We're being asked to approve these as an accurate record. Does anyone have any comments? Nope. So we'll take those as approved. Thank you. An updated minutes action log was included in the published papers for today. Do we have any questions on the action log? Nope. So we'll take that as noted. We have no petitions or public questions this month. So we move to item 4. So item 4 on the agenda is a report on education capital projects. Appendix A of this report is confidential. If members wish to discuss this appendix, it will be necessary to move this item to the end of the meeting, at which point we would need to vote to exclude the press and public from the meeting on the grounds that the document contains exempt information under paragraph 3 of part 1, schedule 12A of the Local Government Act 1972 as amended, and it would not be in public interest for this information to be disclosed. Information relating to the financial or business affairs of any particular person, including the authority holding that information. Do any members wish to discuss Appendix A? No. Nice try. I'm not seeing any hands, but if we do want to, we'll have to sort that out. Brilliant. So the report without the Appendix A will be introduced by Sarah Callahan, our Service Director for Education, and Rachel Pinion, our Strategic Education Capital and Place Planning Manager. Welcome both. If you'd like to give us an introduction and summary, please, when you're ready.
Thank you, everybody. Is my mic on? Oh, good. That's the first hurdle. So, yeah, the report presented this afternoon is to ask for your decision regarding awarding contracts for a number of educational capital projects. This is because we obviously have a statutory duty to meet our sufficiency for places for children and young people. 4 of the contracts are asked to be supported retrospectively, and the reason for this is because education capital projects, quite often the costs escalate as they're being progressed. And so the costs associated with those four has exceeded the key decision making figure, which is 500,000. So we're asking for you to agree those retrospectively. And there's a number of other educational capital projects that we're suggesting, because the costs quite often exceed the 500,000 key decision threshold, they should be delegated for decision to the Executive Director for Children, Education and Families, with the chair of this committee. So if there's any questions regarding the detail of those projects, I'll defer to Rachel, but that's basically the summary in terms of what we're requesting. Thank you.
Brilliant, thank you. I've got Councillor Bradnam first, please.
Thank you very much, Chair. Just one thing for Sarah, when you speak again, if you could bring the microphone just a little bit closer to you, I think that might be helpful. Thank you. This is a slightly left field question, and that is, I'm just slightly concerned about the list we've got at 3.4 of projects that are in hand and obviously need to make provision for financially in the way you've just described. But I'm just slightly concerned that Waterbeach new primary school is not on the list, because I know the original application for it was withdrawn by the County Council with a view to resubmitting it. But I'm slightly concerned as to where Waterbeach primary school is in the general scheme of things. And if that's an answer that needs to be given to me separately by email, that's fine, because it's outside what's on this actual paper.
Yeah, we'll provide an update on Waterbeach outside of the meeting. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sharp, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm just trying to understand the comments in return in terms of the retrospective letting of the contracts, because in the narrative it says the advice should have come to June CYP committee, but was delayed obviously because of the election. And I'm trying to understand what you said, because one of the contracts, for example, Kennet Primary School, they started on site 18th of September last year, so that couldn't have been delayed because of the election. And Mainey Primary, 28th of May on site. So I'm trying to understand what are the issues. I know you mentioned the 500k limit, but presumably we let a contract with a certain amount of cost and presumably contingencies. So does that contingency come into the 500,000? So I'm trying to understand why we've got into that situation on the 500k limit, because I'm presuming that's why those 4 under 3.4 are there.
I might need Rachel to expand on that, but basically what I was trying to describe is that with capital projects, often you'll find that something is not preempted, and so the costs associated with that capital development can escalate. But I think it's also fair to say that we want to operate within the governance arrangements within the council, and so we reviewed those decisions and just wanted to ensure we didn't pause them, but we wanted to ensure that we had the right recording in terms of in line with our governance arrangements within the council. So I think really it was because the costs can sometimes be inflated against the original estimates, and I think that's quite typical within capital projects, but Rachel probably has more of the specific detail.
So on these 4 projects, they're in the council approved business plan, and they've been let under framework contracts which have come to committee for approval before. So officers were working on the assumption that those contracts could be let, but advice that we've received recently is that as they're a key decision, each individual contract needs to come to committee. So that's why we've brought these 4 back, showing that they're a breach.
I won't come back on that. Yes, I mean, you mentioned, sorry, earlier about things will change. I mean, variations to contract will change, obviously. As you're going through a construction project, something else will, okay, let's do that instead of that. And that obviously has a cost implication. So I understand that. So going back to what you, sorry, I forgot your name, so apologies. What you're saying is because you're just trying to normalise the situation by bringing these to committee now. So are we saying that in the future, all of these types of projects will come to committee regardless of whether they're above 500k or not?
So any contract that's above the 500k, we've put on the forward agenda plan a paper in February of each year. So then we've done the council business plan that's approved at January, and then we'll bring the individual contracts that need to be approved in the next financial year to February committee for approval separately.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack, please.
Thank you. It's Sarah, isn't it? So I'm over here.
Yes, that's right.
Thank you, Sarah. Something you just said there just triggered me a little bit, and I'd just like to explore it a little bit further. I've had a long-held moan, I guess is the word, but issue with the quality and of project management across the county. And here we sit at education today, looking at project management, where you've just openly said, well, costs go up, so we've gone above a threshold. There's only three elements to any project, which is time, cost, and quality, right? And if we're forecasting that these costs go up, but we're not making allowances for them in initiation documents when we start projects, I've really got concerns for that, because that's just, we happen to have a 500k threshold. What about something started at 4 million is now 5? Where's that? How are we capturing that? What are we doing about that? So I'm sure you're not saying that's just flippant and that's how we do with it. I'm not saying that, Sarah, but I'm just saying that the quality and the ability of the project management involved in these projects leaves me asking a lot of questions and a little bit nervous, not just on the fort. I mean, maybe one of the things that could help, and I'd really rather you tried not to delve into the confidential matters for everything the chairman said, but if you could give us an example of one of those four without naming them that said the value was X, it's now changed to Y, and therefore it's over the threshold. Because I'm looking through these and I'm thinking, right, so we've added 180 to 300 permanents on the first one. Well, that's got to be more than £500,000 worth of build. Blah, blah, and I'm struggling to understand them, even though I've gone through the thing. So two parts to that. One is the quality of project management and a project initiation and how we're getting it right. Because often I think you'd be better off to say, I think it's going to be X plus rather than X minus to try and get the tick. You know, then you can better budget. The second aspect to this is I'd really like to know what the variances are on some of these, because just by going over a threshold worries me about those that are already well above the threshold. Costs have gone up, therefore potentially there's a bigger rise in them, but we're not seeing it.
I probably will need to refer to Rachel in terms of giving an illustration of how those costs can escalate. But what I can say is that I've been very reassured that there's very robust arrangements in place in terms of monitoring the capital projects. And I think, as Rachel's just alluded to, there is a framework within which we work within. So the point I was trying to make was sometimes there's things you can't preempt and those costs escalate, but that doesn't mean that we don't have recurrent oversight of the expenditure within those projects. So I will ask Rachel to give an example of that, because I don't want to make random references to things, but there is a very robust process in place to ensure that we do have a tight grip on the expenditure. But what we wanted to illustrate, and why we're asking that this is delegated to the executive director alongside the chair of the committee, is that quite often capital projects do have costs that you cannot anticipate and you do have to respond to, and there is a margin within which you would operate within that framework.
I think to just mention the point around the delegated approval, what we're asking for there is delegated approval up to 1 million for our minor works schemes. So for those schemes which make sure that we're keeping schools warm, safe and dry. Now, what Sarah was saying is that costs for those sorts of schemes have escalated over the last few years. So, you know, a cost that previously would have been below the limit. Now the costs, when we're tendering for these projects, those costs are coming in higher. So we will need to bring those projects to committee at the moment for approval. In terms of costs as projects move forward, we track those every milestone and working with our contractors in between milestones. But on the most recent project, we've got an open book approach between the contractor and our consultant and our core project team. And we're looking at costs all the way through. And we have a risk register for each project. So we're flagging what the risks are for time and for cost. And also we do have a contingency budget within our overall project costs. So we're not saying here we're bringing these because these have just randomly exceeded the limit. We're saying we're bringing these to committee to ask to enter into most of these contracts or for retrospective approval, as we've already entered into them, but that we are tracking costs.
Thank you, Chair. Through you again. Thank you for the responses. I'd just like to go back almost to the basics. And that is a word called contingency. If you start a project and there's a high risk involved, then I expect the contingency involved to be requested to be higher, and that should be built in to capture it. I know we've had unprecedented cost raises over the last 2 to 3 years, right? I don't need to list the reasons. Everybody knows the reasons. But I just find it a little bit worrying that before us today are some retrospective things that I can't understand from a project management point of view. What's gone wrong? Why are we in this position? Nothing before me. And Sarah, I'll take your word that you are assured that there's robust, but I have to report back to ward members who ask me questions at parish council meetings and things like this. And I can't exactly say, don't worry, Sarah says it's all okay. I need more information on it. And follow up.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Slatter next, please.
I think the discussion we just heard does emphasise the fact that an awful lot of us are not experienced in project management, but a report like this brings to my attention just the extraordinary range of issues that our officers are dealing with across the county. And I'm glad that our new director is assured. I'm assuming that along the way to this, we are already compromising again and again and again on some of the small details, and we will be inevitably disappointing our residents sometimes with what we can deliver. There was just one small point, because much of what I was going to ask about is, I think, gone downstream with that previous conversation. The forward-looking ones, page 25, Highfields, we've got a bit of we've got a word missing there that probably shouldn't carry forward as being missing. In terms of, obviously, it's going to be copy and pasting going on, just to save any embarrassment. We've the issue for where the catchment area of this expanding school will need to be put in there, or perhaps put in such a way that it makes sense. We've got at the moment, as you can see, young people to be able to access. So I think we just need to say, even if it's just, you know, the area, that would help. Thank you. I know the principle behind it. Thank you.
Thank you. Dr. Stone, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's just a question about the raising of the limit from $500,000 to $1 million. Well, I understand there's been significant inflation. I don't know how long it's been held at $500,000, but to go from $500,000 to $1 million, what's the rationale for such an increase?
So our minor works framework finishes at £1 million. So then it would cover our minor works, which is kind of our reactive or our planned maintenance around our maintained schools.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's something that I'm going to pick up on the delegation recommendation C, and if Chair and committee would think about using, I haven't got an issue with this being delegated to Sarah or anyone higher than Sarah and chair and vice chair of CYP committee. But I think we're missing an element there. And I am picking up on Councillor Goldsack's thought process, is that we're missing cross-party work in here and understanding, what I'm saying is I'm not too worried about the delegation going to you, but I still think cross-party, so through spokes, that we need to see this at some point. And I was just wondering if committee thought process is something that, along mine, that I think it needs to come through spoke at some point.
I think I'm right in saying this would come through spokes anyhow, but the delegation would be through Martin, chair and vice chair, so it would come through spokes.
If I may, Chair, could we add that to the recommendation at C, that is an element that it will come through spokes, just so we're clear on that, that we have got sight of it cross-party working?
So if we just add in through spokes to the recommendation, that would be. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. If I have that on, your authority, then I'm happy with that. If other members are happy with that we do see this coming through spokes, whether or not it's a recommendation or not.
I'll ensure that's minuted, so it's that agreement.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Bradnam next, please.
Thank you. I suppose maybe like others, I was sort of wishing for a little bit more background as to why the costs have gone up. I know, I imagine, and I suppose what I'm asking for is confirmation that these were contracts maybe that were let possibly 2 or 3 years ago and have now come to fruition. And that's why the costs have increased massively, because building costs have increased massively over the last couple of years. But a bit in line with Councillor Goldsack, I looked at some of the numbers and I was slightly surprised to see that a couple of them had actually doubled. And I was thinking, is that what we'd expect of a contract let, that it would go up that much? I just wonder if you could clarify the history, as it were.
Rachel, I wonder if you can tell us what sort of contingency you normally build into these projects as well. That might help.
Yeah, the contingency is normally between 5 and 10%, depending on the scale of the project. So to clarify, none of these projects have increased in cost from the terms of when we've let the contract to now in any of these ones in the paper. Sarah was just talking about going forward, if we get new projects coming in, the cost of those projects are going to be higher than if we'd have let them 5 or 6 years ago. So that's why we're asking for the delegated authority for the amount to increase. So it's not that these projects have gone wrong at all. Most of these very smooth projects that are working to the cost that we were expecting. So I'm not sure which costs you're looking at to see that.
Forgive me, but I'm not going to allude to it because it's in the confidential papers. But this is a budgeted amounts of money that are now beyond what was originally planned in the budget. So that's all I was asking. So this is not this is relating, as far as I'm aware, to a budget that's currently running, and it looks as if the costs are going to outstrip what was allowed for in the budget. And so I was just wondering why along the same lines as Councillor Goldsack has said, how come, was it that the original amount wasn't reasonable for the actual planned project? I absolutely hear what you say. The officers have a very robust process. So if it is simply that building costs have gone up by twice, have doubled over that time, then maybe that's the answer.
Can I just check, are we still happy to not discuss the right? I think Rachel and then Martin.
I'll let Martin speak because I'm not sure how to answer it without referencing the costs.
Well, I was going to suggest that as some of this is going to be difficult to talk about, would it be helpful for members of here to get a briefing note on these 4 projects outside of here so you can understand the costs issue? But I think the issue that we're talking about is the retrospective approvals for these projects. These projects have been to members before in their forward plan for the annual work plan. The reason they've come back here is that the monitoring officer felt that that decision was not sufficient given the scale of these particular 4 projects. So that we've brought them back here for transparency purposes and to make sure they have the correct decision making so that you as members get to see exactly what they are. They have been to members before, but but the monitoring officer advised that we bring them back here for retrospective approval from CYP committee due to their specific nature of these individual cases. I think that's right.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Ambrose Smith next, please.
Thank you very much. My question is quite simple. Does the Constitution allow this committee or any committee to increase the £500,000 limit for any officer? Because at the moment, as it stands in C, I cannot agree with that to go ahead.
So that's been through the monitoring officer and
yes, I realise these all go through the monitoring officer. I'm just asking the question to get, do they?
yes.
Fine. Thank you.
Thank you. I have Councillor Boulat next, please.
Thank you, Chair. On this theme around the increase in construction costs, I just want to unpack a little bit how much do we think it's impacts across the country as opposed to something we can change locally? Because in other words, if we're saying that like lots of it is influenced by inflation or decisions at the national level or lack of skills or like recruitment issues, then you can easily see how we might end up in very similar situations later on, although probably people hope that some things will improve. So I wonder to what extent do we have any control or any mitigations over those issues? And also, is this situation being experienced in a very similar way across councils, or do you think we're in a particular worse off position in our region or the eastern region as opposed to other parts of the country? I'm just trying to understand if that's something that more councils now at the same moment discuss those almost doubled costs or not.
Cost in terms of construction costs are kind of a nationwide feel. The construction industry has seen unprecedented costs since really the war in Ukraine, increasing the material costs and then labour shortages on from there. In terms of what we can do to mitigate the risk, we have a 2-stage process in our design and build framework. So we would design the scheme with the contractors, and then we get to a certain point and agree a cost, and then go forward to the build part of the process. What we're trying out now with the test case is bringing that certainty around costs much further forward. So we're agreeing with the contractor much earlier on in the process. There's advantages and disadvantages to both, but in terms of cost management, we're gonna try and see if that has a positive impact, because previously in schemes we have had rising costs, and then the reference to Waterbeach earlier, we've had to stop at a certain point because the costs have been too high. So we are looking at it as well.
Thank you. Councillor Thompson, please.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask, because I deal quite a lot of construction in Northstowe, which is a brand new community. most of the section 106, well, some of the section 106 is indexed. Is that something that we do? That's one. And number two, I just wanted to speak about for it to go to spokes. If we do go to spokes, it would be really advisable that members are informed, because, you know, within their ward of, you know, otherwise, if it doesn't come to committee, they're unaware that it's happening. So it's important to keep members informed. Thank you.
Yeah, we do index link all of our section 106 agreements. Yes.
Thank you. Councillor Coots, please.
Apologies for returning to a sort of a theme of other people here. Just want to be entirely clear of the three recommendations we've got here. The discussion about cost slippage seems to apply only to recommendations B and C and have nothing whatsoever to do with recommendation A. Is that correct?
Yes.
So what is the reason for recommendation A then? What was the reason for these contracts not being approved in the right way?
As Martin said, that because we had the framework approved and we had them in the business plan, officers were working on the assumption that they'd been approved, but the monitoring officer has advised actually to bring each separate contract back through to committee for approval.
So this is a sort of belt and braces, make sure we're doing things absolutely right, and has nothing to do with cost slippage or election dates or anything.
No,
Okay.
in terms of recommendation A, no.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to, Rachel came back on what you were going to say. I was going to reinforce Rachel's point. Yeah, it's got nothing to do with cost slippage. The delegation is really to mop up small increases. Anything particularly large or any major project changes would need to come back here. But no, the cost slippage has got nothing to do with that.
Thank you. Councillor Daunton next, please.
I'd just like to make a comment, please, about Teversham Primary School, which is in my division. I'm delighted to see that the project is here for approval. And it makes clear, the text makes clear that it's an early years mobile beyond, replacing an early years mobile beyond economic repair. So I'd just like to put in a plea, and it was indeed, or it is indeed beyond economic repair. So I'd just like to put in a plea that that kind of thing doesn't happen again. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? Councillor Gordsack.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for allowing me back in. Along with what my colleague to my right said earlier, I have no real problem with A and B, and thank you for Martin for explaining that, because I thought that took us beyond what's in the paper and actually helped us understand that the monitoring officer has actually brought back perfectly valid projects and said you need to get authority for these because it's missing. That's not what I read, if I'm honest with you. So I do appreciate that. So I haven't got a real problem with A or B, but to be honest with you, I'm really struggling in our world at this moment. I know inflation's been bad and everything, but it's not been 100%. And we're going from 500 to a million. It just seems too high to me. I can't see a justification for it at all. Had you come in, you know, when you're dealing with a project continuously between 5 and 10%, and you want a 100% increase on your budget, that's just a little bit worrying if you're signing that off. I'd have real budgetary control concerns about that. I would think if you would have come in at something more like 600 or 650,000 or a much lower figure and worked more on your contingency side of things, I think there's a balance there. But I have to say at this moment in time, I couldn't agree to C, but I could agree to A and B.
I suppose it's balancing the risk between making sure that we have committee approval for projects and making sure that we're fulfilling our sufficiency duty. So I suppose an example of the type of project that would come in above £500,000, I don't know if there's a problem with a roof at a school and we very quickly need to go out and do some re-roofing works or some structural changes, and that the cost of that comes in at over £500,000, then we wouldn't be able to react to that quickly in terms of we'd have to schedule it into the next committee. So it might be that school is out of action for, I don't know, 3 or 4 months, as opposed to maybe we could have turned that work around in 6 weeks. So it is asking around exceptional cases, as opposed to it kind of being run of the mill work. Because what we hope to do is every year bring a paper like this to committee with the contracts for the next year that are planned, and that those are approved, and then we can go off and we can complete that work. So it's more in terms of being able to be reactive to keep our children in school.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. I think you're being very candid in your answer, so I appreciate what you're saying. It doesn't say exceptional in C. Your words say exceptional. It doesn't say that in C. It basically says, and I tell you how, I will paraphrase what it says. We can't really handle a 500,000. Can we have 1 million, please? That's what I'm seeing. And for that reason, and for the project controls that we've discussed, and for the level of contingency that's involved, I just can't support C, I'm afraid.
I mean, I'm happy to take the recommendations separately if you would prefer, Councillor Godsack. I think I would see it as an exceptional thing. I wouldn't be expecting to discuss in spokes or in a meeting with chair and vice chair something that could come before committee. It would be an exceptional thing, but it's if you want to take it separately, based on whether or not you would trust that delegation, that's absolutely fine.
If I can again come back, Chair, my worry is, and the officers very openly said it, is it would be deal on exceptional. In 3 years' time, it won't be exceptional. It will be the norm. Everything will run to 1 million. It's just the way it works. It's just the way the budgeting works. And actually what they'll be doing is they'll be asking for 1.2 million. I just think it's too big a raise now to not put before members in terms of, you know, with the greatest respect, the administration are constantly telling us, and we believe them, that they haven't got enough money. Right. So what we're saying here is here's your ability to spend more. It's a fantastic and absolutely needed subject matter for spending the money, but we've got to have some controls on it. We can't just go out. Your roof example is a decent example, but you know, I think what we've got to do is we've got to go out, we've got to mend and do, and then come back with a proper budget for it. Not okay, that's now covered, because if it won't be the roof next time, it'll be a bigger project, and that will push it to more. It does not say in section C anything about this to be an exception and managed through spokes. Just doesn't say it.
I just wondered if the wording, you know, where it's actually saying in consultation, enables that judgment. So I think it's saying that currently the level is 500,000, but by supporting that delegation to the exec director and chair and vice chair, the scope obviously for chair and vice chair to say, actually, no, this should be presented to committee. So I think that's the nuance within that. It's not an automatic assumption that everything that gets to £1 million would not be presented to committee, but it gives the scope for chair and vice chair to make that recommendation.
Councillor Taylor, please.
Thank you, Chair. I haven't got an issue with C apart from what I spoke of earlier, that it should come through spokes for joint for cross-party working. I think we've got to get a grips on the fact that, and I understand what you're saying, Councillor Goldsack, and it is that word sort of exceptional, but we've got to make sure that our schools can open for our children. And if it is exceptional, if it's an act of God, there's a flood, that, you know, there's a fire, you know, God forbid, that we've got to act on this quickly, through you, Chair. And so in that respect, I will support recommendation C, because we can't be seen to be going through the committee cycle and waiting for that delegation when our children haven't got a school to go to. But that is my thought process.
Thank you. We do have one school closed today through lack of water, and one partially closed following a fire. It does happen with our schools, and as we've said, it's exceptional that we would have to approve this without committee approval. But education is obviously such an important thing for our young people. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you. Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back again. I support what Councillor Taylor has said. The point being is, you know, you look at £1 million. Okay, it sounds an awful lot, and I absolutely respect the fact that we need to keep a control on what we spend. But you've only got to look at the costs associated with doing works on, say, your own house roof, and you think about the likely costs that that would have if you were dealing with a school roof, a school heating system, a school solar panel, you know, whatever, something went wrong with it, or indeed fire or flood damage. This is recognizing that it costs a lot to put a larger building right, and they need to have the authority to approve that. So I have no objection to agreeing C.
I think there's a distinction here that maybe I'm falling one side of and others are falling the other. I would expect if a school was flooded or burnt out for emergency procedures to come into play and everything to come fruition. What we're talking about here in the 4 items that we've been given for retrospective approval are school decisions that are made on growth. Growth is forecast 3 to 5 years in advance, I believe. You know, so these are not surprise decisions. So these should be coming towards us. There's no reason why these should be dealt with under an emergency. These are being dealt with at this stage because the legal officer has said, I'm not sure these are 100% legal at the moment. We need compliance on this. Now, let me just put the cards on the table. We are in opposition, and our job is to scrutinise and hold the administration to account. Okay, what you're asking us to do here is to double. Let's get the words right. To double the liability of sign off at the front end that we've got no knowledge of. We've had to have this meeting today and get verbal input over the papers to really understand what's going on anyway, right? That doesn't instill me with the greatest amount of confidence for me to be able to scrutinise and hold people to account. If I can add one last thing, look, you have the numbers. I'm saying I can't vote for it. Some of my colleagues may vote for it. You know, we haven't discussed this. What I'm saying is I can't vote for that. I think it's far too big a leap to go from 500 to £1 million. You think it is? Vote it through. On we go.
Thank you. If everybody is happy, I think it's time to move for a vote. Shall we take all 3 separately? Is that easiest? Yes, I'm seeing nods. Is that all right, Tamar? Sorry, Councillor
Could I check
Slatter.
the wording of the consultation? I am very much in favour of what Councillor Taylor is suggesting to make it as cross-party as possible. I think this, but anything else, will avoid any geographical gaps in local knowledge and understanding. So the sort of thing that could go wrong because we hadn't heard from the local member by whatever scheme of communication, and we would have made a better decision if we had. It's the difference between what is coming to this committee and what might be coming, might be delegated. I think the thing is, are we missing out on local knowledge and input? So if the wording of the C could be more explicit and include spokes, I'd be happier.
I think we agreed that we didn't need to change the wording, did we, Tamar? Because it would go through spokes anyhow, and comes through that way. We will, of course, make sure that local members are involved with projects, and I know Rachel's very good at contacting local members around projects and changes and that kind of thing. And obviously through spokes, each party should then be informed following spokes about what's been discussed through their spoke. So if we can take each items separately, I think. So we're being, co-opted members of the committee are eligible to vote on this report. We're being asked to A, retrospectively award design or professional services and construction contracts which are in breach of the contract procedure rules, brackets, the rules. All those in favour, please. That's unanimous. Thank you, Tamar. B, to agree to awarding and executing the design, professional services and construction contracts for projects set out in section 3.5, please. All those in favour? Unanimous, thank you. And C, to delegate to the Executive Director of Children, Education and Families in consultation with the Chair and Vice Chair of the CYP Committee the authority to award or design professional services, JCT minor works / intermediate contracts and construction contracts up to £1 million in value. All of those in favour, please. Thank you. All of those against? Tamar, can you?
So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. That's 10. That's 10 in favour and 5 against.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Rachel. Thank you, Sarah. Item 5. So item 5 is the Children, Education and Families Risk Report, and Dee Evans, our governance manager, is introducing this report to us. Welcome, Dee. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Steve Evans. I'm the governance manager across Children, Education and Families, and part of my role is to help support management of risk across our area. This report is being received every 6 months at committee. You last received a report in March 24 this year. Risks are regularly reviewed, and this is the Directorate Risk Register. We have 3 types of reports. There's a Service Risk Register, which is held internally, the Directorate Risk Report, which is actually in front of you, and then we have a Corporate Risk Register, which is discussed at other committee. We have currently got 9 risks on the list. 4 are outlined as high risk and 5 are remaining as amber. The majority of these have remained steady to since the last report was presented in March. So it's just if you've got any other questions.
Thank you, Dee. Questions and comments, please. Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up on the safety valve. Certainly in 3.5, so this is the overview of Children's Education and Family Directorate, the risk register. So that's August. I think I've done a little bit of research on this, and currently there's 38 LAs in the safety valve programme. There are some of it, I looked at their neighbours, and they are starting to deliver better value. And I'm guessing this is the issue that we've got, that the DOV have basically stopped this and not given us the rest of the money. I just need to understand that a bit more. So the neighbours that are given better values include Suffolk. So I was just wondering, and also there are no DSG deficits within Essex and Hertfordshire. So I was just wondering whether we are looking at our neighbours to get some sort of advice from them and how, you know, how they could maybe help us with this. I just need to understand that, you know, we've got this money, we've managed to get the safety valve, but now we're at that halt with it, and it just feels really frustrating that, you know, we can't give what the DOV are asking us to give. I just need to understand that a little.
Thank you. So the plan with the safety valve was the investment that we get from the Department of Education meant that, sorry, is that better? Sorry, is that, thank you. Is that better? Excellent. So the investment from the Department of Education was in an agreement with the local authority whereby over the period of 5 years, we would be back within our means from our high needs block. The forecasting that we were showing at the end of last year meant that we were off track to do that, which is why the Department of Education paused our involvement and put us into what they call the enhanced monitoring and support, which means we get advice from the Department of Education advisors. And we're also working with other regional partners in answer to your question. And there's conversations with lots and lots of different people looking at what things are working and what isn't working for different local authorities. While we're in the enhanced monitoring and support phase, the funding that we're getting has been paused, but it's also allowed us an opportunity to review and reset our forecasting. So we've got to go back to the Department of Education in the autumn of this year, in October, by the end of October, with a reforecasting of where we're going to be. And we're not going to get any more money, but just to reforecast our trajectory, looking at the work that we're doing to reduce the costs, reduce the number, reduce the costs of our EHCPs, but still making sure that children that need an EHCP have the right services and the right education. So it's a complex piece of work that has been that's going on at the moment, and we're confident that we'll be able to have that piece of work done in time to get DfE approval in October. Once the DfE approve our plan, then we won't be submitting anything that isn't going to be approvable, but assuming that they're happy with it, then we will be back within the safety valve family, if you like, and we'll be back on track, but with a refreshed timeline and a refreshed forecast.
Thank you. And then the rest of the funding will be available to us. Is that?
Yeah, the funding is released periodically, but yes, that we would once we're back, once we have resubmitted a forecast and the Department of Education has approved it, then yes, that we will be back within the safety valve family, back on our payment plan, if you like.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to pick up, and this is not political, if anyone thinks it is, it's not. So I need to understand where, because obviously we have a new government, do officers understand where the safety valve scheme, what the future will be with the new government? Is it something they're going to continue? I'm just a bit nervous that whether things start changing, we're going to lose funding and things like that.
So as you will know, that there is a huge, there's a combined deficit across all of the local authorities, not just those in the safety valve, whereby there is an enormous deficit in the country. The Department of Education has not given us any indication they're going to change their processes. We are just working towards the safety valve resubmission. That's all that we're doing at the moment. We've got no intelligence that there's going to be any changes, but that's all that we've got.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
Thank you, Chair. It's linked to the same thing, and I understood, I might have remembered this incorrectly, but I understood that in Cambridgeshire, we have a higher proportion of children with EHCPs than our neighbouring counties. And this has been driven by the sort of high-tech industries and high-tech work and employment that we have in this area. And as a result, we have a larger number of children with more of those sorts of needs that come from all sorts of concerns. But I might be wrong in that, but that was my understanding. And so is recognition being given to the fact that we have a very high proportion of children with particular needs such that they need an EHCP? And is that being taken into account by central government?
We have you're right, we do have a marginally higher proportion of children who currently have an education, health and care plan in Cambridgeshire than our neighbours, but it's not an enormous difference. It's marginal in some cases, but bearing in mind there are 11 local authorities in the Eastern region, so there is some difference, but we're pretty close to others. No, there's no account given to that in the Department of Education. The number of children that require an assessment, the number of children that require a plan coming out of that assessment require a plan. That's just the numbers that you have to work with. What the Department of Education would like to see, and what we would hope out of the original safety valve agreement and transformation plan, which we are looking at now as part of our renewed work, would be that how we can maybe meet children's needs earlier. Maybe a number of children don't need to have plans. We can do a different type of support for them and support for schools to make sure that they still get this help and support that they need. It's not just about having an EHCP. It's about making sure that their local schools are inclusive enough to take as many children from their local area as they possibly can. The part of the costs of EHCPs is that a number of children go to independent special schools, which are able to meet their needs, and lots of those children will still need to do that regardless of the safety valve. What Safety Valve asks us to do is to make sure that we can make sure that as many children get their needs met locally and at as little cost as possible. But the primary driver for all of the assessment work and all of the plans is that children's needs are met. That's the real issue.
And if I may come back, so there's several elements to this, isn't there? You've confirmed that, as I thought, we do in this area have slightly more children with EHCPs, but there's two things going on. There's this particular hotbed of need actually around Cambridge City itself and the area here, but also there's the increase in population which is being driven locally also by the high-tech industry and a lot of developments happening in the area and more provision for housing in this area to accommodate those people. So there's a double multiple, as it were, going on. And I'm just wondering, has this also been calculated on the basis not only of per head of population, but also the actual population that we've got?
I don't think it has. No, I think that's the simplest answer. I don't think it has. I think you could look at it and say that we are good at identifying children that need extra support needs. That's why we've got a higher number of plans. I don't know that there's been any real in-depth analysis about what's driving underneath that in Cambridgeshire in particular regarding particular industries. I haven't seen that. I think we can have a hypothesis about it, but I haven't seen any evidence to actually support that definitively. But I get what you're saying. But the growth across Cambridgeshire, no, I don't think we've seen anything that relates to that directly.
Thank you. Councillor Slatter, please.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's also to do with the amount of research that goes on in the background. I know that in the council there's a mind-blowing amount of research that goes into things that actually don't happen, but we're very glad they've done the research if it does happen. It's been touched on with a change of government and a change of policy. And you've also mentioned it just yourself, and that is the proportion of our residents who send their children to independent schools and who may be pushed for one reason or another to come, to need a place with our schools. I would be interested to know, or to at least know that the numbers are being crunched somewhere in terms of you're aware of how many places are provided by the private sector. I would be interested to know how many of our residents are taking up those places and whether that is anything like a serious issue. Residents have raised it with me, and I would like to know whether it's actually not as serious as we might think, because we're talking tiny numbers who we might suddenly find are coming in, and we haven't taken account of. It was risk, sorry, I should have said at the beginning, risk 8. Yeah, that's it, risk 8.
It would probably be worth a conversation to clarify exactly what it is that you want to know, because first of all, I wouldn't be able to give you that number straight away off the top of my head, but it would be good just to clarify. So are we talking about independent special schools? Are we talking about independent mainstream schools? Are we talking about a combination of all of those schools? Are we talking about private specialist provision that's in county or out of county? So there's a whole range of different resources that young people with special educational needs are accessing. Some of them are identified by their parents, some of them are identified by us. So there's a whole range, a massive broad spectrum of educational establishments that children are attending to make sure that they get the education that they need.
To clarify some of that, I appreciate sometimes we do pay for children to go to privately run schools that are specialist, as you say. I was more thinking mainstream, because we do know of many people who are able to buy smaller class sizes, and we know that our own schools would love to have smaller class sizes, and it's just that tipping point for a lot of parents.
Yep. And we probably have some of that information about about the numbers of children locally that attend our schools as opposed to attend independent schools. I don't have it to hand, but I'm sure that we have some idea of what that looks like. Yes.
Thank you. I have Councillor Sharp next, please.
Thank you, Chair. I've got comments or questions on 3 risks, and they're risks 1, 2, and 3. So I'll take them. The first one is more of a comment in that because I don't think I'm going to get the answers today, but certainly I sit on Audit and Accounts Committee, and certainly at the last Audit and Accounts Committee, I understand there's an internal audit, a rather scathing internal audit report on the safety valve. I've not seen it, but I was told there was certainly a request that it came to this committee. I was going to bring it up on the agenda plan, but I was certainly believe that it was going to be brought to the committee. So I can't really comment anymore without seeing that. So I'll leave that risk 1 as it is. Going on to risk 2, which is around cost pressures, and it's around the home to school transport policy. I'll take members back to January, certainly, when we were looking at the budget, and there were 2 areas of the budget that I had massive concerns about. One was the home to school transport, and my words were, I really hope that you succeed, but I've got massive doubts that you're actually going to do it. And we're in the situation here where that sadly that those words have come home to roost, so to speak, in that we, the plan that we had in place, if we had a plan, doesn't seem to have worked. So we've either got to budget appropriately or we show an overspend. And then the third comment, again similarly, is around social workers. I believe we had an academy, or we were setting something up to obviously grow our own, which is obviously cheaper. But again, again looking at the triggers on risk 3, a great reliance, which causes a pressure on agency workers. So, I'm not being like a record that's going round and round, but those things are, again, as Councillor Goldsack said earlier, we're the opposition, so I think we've got to bring the administration to account. So hence the comments. But say risk 1, I don't think I can say any more on now, because I think we need that report. But interested to hear the comments on risk 2 or 3. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll go to risk 2. There has been continued pressure on the home to school transport budget, and that is linked in many ways to the continued growth in education, health and care plans that we're talking about in risk 1. As children need to be transported to schools that are not in the local area so they can access specialist independent education. So that really is a high factor in driving up those continued pressure in that category. For risk 3, we are doing an awful lot of work to look at to manage our caseloads and the workforce capacity for social workers, and we're seeing some real progress on that. We had a debate about whether to share the information in this version of the risk register or not. We felt that we've seen some really amazing progress, to be honest, but we felt that it was a little bit too young, too green to put into this risk. Risk register. We wanted to see over a period of 3 months whether that sustained reduction in workload pressure was sustainable. And if it was, then we will be going to bring that back to this committee, and we will do at the next opportunity. So I think we'll see some real progress on that number 3. That risk reducing. If things continue as they are, I think you'll be really pleased to see the progress that we've made. Not only that, we've done a lot of work related to the academy, which you're right to mention. We've got an increased number of newly qualified social workers going through our academy. We've had 6 newly qualified social workers starting in the assessment service, along with 3 international social workers. They're all being linked to the academy to give them the support that they need, and as they either arrive in this country and get used to our system of social work practice, or going through their newly qualified year. So eventually they will get some additional support while they start off as newly qualified social workers or in this country, but eventually they will see the release of agency social workers. So that's really good.
I can come back very quickly. On that third point, thank you very much for that, Michael. Obviously, look forward to seeing the report in 3 months' time, because it will hopefully help on costs, and obviously on we've got more staff and caseload, you know, to handle the caseload. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you. I've got Councillor Daunton next, please.
I'm looking at number 6, the lack of capacity and threshold within the wider partner system. I'd just like a bit more information on the mitigation. It just says continuous improvement with multi-agency partners continues. Could I just have a little bit more information on that, please?
So yeah, in Cambridgeshire, like almost all local authorities, I think, across the country, we have a insufficient amount of placements for our looked after children. Certainly within Cambridgeshire, there are not enough placements. We've got children placed outside of the borough, outside of the local authority area. But there is a national shortage of care placements for children, and that is driving up costs. And one of the papers that came to the previous committee was the residential strategy, which is going to Strategy and Resources next month for agreement to the investment to developing our own residential resources, which will help us enormously on risk 6 and in bringing children back into Cambridgeshire. So that will have a 2-pronged benefit to children and young people.
Might I just go? So in fact, the lack of capacity there is the lack of capacity for care, for in-county care. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Yeah, I think it might be helpful to state that more clearly, and also the mitigation, to have a little bit more clarity in the mitigation. Thank you.
By the time we bring this report back, we will have been through Strategy and Resources, and we'll make that much clearer in that report.
Thank you. Councillor Goldsack, please.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you very much. Couple of points. I'm going to focus mainly on risk 2, just for the benefit of the paperwork. Let's break this down. The EHCPs and the SEND needs are growing. Our school provision places aren't keeping pace with that. That's just where we're at. The schools we have are a long way away from certain aspects of our society who compound the cost, because of every mile they travel is an extra cost. So we've got a long way to do. So, you know, I know money's tight, but, you know, we've got to make a balance here of supporting schools to try and maintain as much as we possibly can to have SEND related children educated as part of mainstream. But those schools need the support, and the support funding model for them is still student based. It's, you've got X number of pupils, you get Y amount of money in for it. Now, on a positive, we've got a couple of years coming ahead now, and I think the officers have shared this with me before, where actually the demand rate for an awful lot of our schools across Cambridgeshire in the next couple of intake rounds are actually lower. Nods will do. Did you get that, mine? Sorry. No, that's okay. What I'm saying there is we've been told that the forecast school intakes in the next few years is actually lower. You'd have thought people being at home during the tail end of COVID might have made it higher, but no, it's the opposite. It's made it lower. Sorry? For primary, yeah. But I think I have actually written to Sarah for more information. I wrote to you, Martin, but it got past to Sarah. And I'm waiting to hear on the algorithms for how we calculate this, because we need to know. We need to know. There's also, and I have to be honest with you, in mainstream education, we are seeing a growth in religious or faith-based transfers, you know, where we're seeing growth of faith-based groups in areas where perhaps they haven't traditionally been. And, you know, the amount of children in a school environment from one faith-based organisation is a very different number to that of a traditional one. And that I want to make sure all of these things are taken in consideration, because one of the things that I find absolutely heartbreaking, well, there's two things, sorry. One, anybody that's got a SEND special need and we can't service it safely and locally, and moving them out of county or moving them across county, that's just heartbreaking. But I tell you what's also heartbreaking, getting a primary school student who lives in a village where the school is and has moved to the village for the school, but because of development that's been allowed, is then outside the catchment area because there have been people moved closer, and they finish up as a 4.5-year-old starting primary school, being put on a taxi to go 4 or 5 miles up the road to the next village to get into a school. That's just abhorrent. You know, now we all know what happens there. Parents or grandparents step in and take the kids to school. Most of them don't avail it, so that's not a cost that dramatically hits us. But look at the social economic knock-on effect of that. So this is such a key area, and it just worries me. You know, you look at a risk register, and by the way, these risk registers, and I thank you, Dee, for the report. These risk registers are so much better than what they used to be. You know, to getting the grips and understanding them now. But, you know, we're looking at this and we're kind of almost saying, oh, well, this will go to SRP. We'll see how we get on, blah, blah, blah. You know, risks 1 and risk 2 are really, really worrying. I'm sorry, you know, it's right when I see them on about Anglia and Look East and being looked into. It's a real major concern to our ward members. They're seeing it and they're interested. You know, so one thing I would say about these reports, and forgive me, but somebody sitting over there just said about it, we need more information in a certain example. I think it was Councillor Daunton said it about item 6. Because you look at item 2 and you actually look at the action plans and what's coming, there's an awful lot hinging on the transport transformation strategy that's coming in November. Because I can't see any other action plans that are going to help with this. And really, we've got to broaden this out. We've got to understand, I'm conscious I'm going on a bit here, but we've got to understand, what is the strategy for SEND schools? Where are they at? Where are we going to build the next ones? Why we know they're coming? Where are they? You know, and I'm not aware that we've seen that.
There are two special free schools being delivered under the Department of Education's free school program, but they are already likely to be delayed because they haven't. Their one was meant to be delivered September 25 and then September 26, 27, but they're unlikely to be delivered on time. They are Department of Education projects. They're not local authority projects. We identified the need for those projects. The Department of Education decided that they would deliver them under the free school program, not through deliveries via the local authority. So we are working to make sure that we don't, with them to keep the pressure on. So hopefully they will be delivered as quickly as possible, but they're not being delivered by the local authority. We are delivering through our SEND transformation program, education resource bases, which is exactly what you're talking about, which is trying to make sure that as many local children as possible, whether they've got special educational needs or not, can attend their local school. And those ERBs, as we're calling them, are having some signs of success. So we are seeing those children that attend those ERBs in the ones that we've started so far. We've got another one coming online in January. Not going out to independent private schools, not having to do those horrible journeys that you highlighted, rightly so. So there's a growing body of evidence that they are supporting children to stay local. So we're going to continue to invest in those. We are seeing a reduction, going back to 2, we are seeing a forecast reduction in mainstream transport over the next 2 years. But that is outweighed by the forecasting increase in SEND transport. Yeah, so.
Back on one aspect of that, if I may, Chair, thank you. That is that when we look at the costs of going to school, this is also notwithstanding some of the abhorrent costs that we are being charged by companies. And I think there is a definite opportunistic racketeering going on here in what we are actually paying for some of our costs. They are ridiculous costs that we're paying. And I think we need to get an awful lot tighter on procurement of these services because, look, I'm not going to bring it up in here, and it would be unfair in a public forum anyway, but some of our individual costs per transport, and I recognise that some of those are really, really special needs. But, you know, if I have a taxi at 7 o'clock on a Saturday night to take me to the pub in the next village, that's not what I get charged to take a child to school. And that's just wrong. You know, that's somebody making the most. If anything, you think it would be cheaper because they're getting a higher volume of chips, and it's not the case. And that comes down to our authorities and our officers' ability to negotiate those at the front end.
I think you've identified a problem which affects everybody and every local authority across the sector. I think you're absolutely right. The school transport isn't like getting a taxi down the road. I wish it was, because it would be much more cost effective. But it isn't like that, and the industry isn't set up like that. And you're right. Sometimes that means that we seem to be paying an extremely high rate for a relatively short journey in some cases, but some of our young people, as you've already highlighted, do need extremely specialist transport. So trying to work out where the specialism is, where the specialist transport is, whether they need someone else in that car with them to do that journey, all of these things add to the costs. And those people, the people providing that transport, can usually only do one transport person a day because everyone needs to get to school for roughly the same time. So it's a really tight marketplace, and one which many local authorities struggle with. But you're right to identify those issues.
Sorry, I've just remembered what I really wanted to come back on. The whole process of school admissions, I know, is centrally governed. You know, you get the dates, you get the things, and you've got to go back to them. That needs to be pushed for review, in my opinion, because I'll tell you what's happening is primary schools may face a burst year. They may have 8, 9, 10 pupils over their intake, be it for one school form entry or 2 school form entries. By the way, you might guess that my wife and both my daughters are all in primary education, so apologies for going on about it. Unless that changes and those primary schools are given enough opportunity and time, there's no good telling them in May that they need to take a burst year of 8 come September, because they can't resource, they can't hire, and they haven't got enough skilled resources to be able to cope with that. And that's I'm not saying that's an authority's problem. I think that's a national problem, but that needs a constant and utter review, because we're setting the schools up to fail and therefore increasing our SEND costs.
And I'm sure you've attended the training on admissions and the complications over admissions and catchments and parental choice and you know, schools managing their own admissions processes and all of that. It does make it all very complicated, but I do agree we need to be working with our schools as early as we can in the process.
Can I just say, just to say that our admissions colleagues do try and do as much advance notice with schools as they possibly can. They analyse the data really, really quickly, and we do everything in line with the timeline that the Department of Education asks us to do. And we try and give as much notice to schools as we can, so that we can actually support parents with information as quickly as possible. But appreciate your own personal knowledge as well. You've probably got some stories which would be interesting to share, but not appropriate for here.
Thank you. Councillor Boulat, please.
Thank you, Chair. I'm afraid that it's also on risk to home to school transport. So I accept there will always be this need, and indeed it's worrying to see this growing need and the increasing cost in specialist transport. But I want to ask around the group of children and young people who don't necessarily need the specialist transport, but could benefit, for instance, if the walking routes were safer, or if indeed the buses existed, or they showed up on time and so on. So on that theme, I wanted to ask if we could have a bit more information or an update in terms of our engagement with the combined authority, like what they're working at the moment on improved bus routes. How do you think that's going? How much influence do we have as a county to align those routes more effectively for those who don't need the specialist transport but could benefit from this? And what is our contribution, I guess, and what are the conversations around the combined authorities franchising consultation in terms and the impact on this one? Thank you.
Thank you. I think on the action notes, can we add in talking about the pilot projects that we've had with the combined authority and bus routes, and have an update for committee? I think that would be useful to have. And within that, we can add in all of the other discussions that we've had with the combined authority around bus routes. I know Councillor Thompson has spent a lot of time on the guided busway this week and seeing where we need extra buses at peak times. And it is that real peak time, isn't it? You know, young people all go to school at the same time of day. Let's start staggering the day, maybe. No, let's not start a revolution from CYP. Councillor Thompson, did you want to come in?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Actually, Alex raises a really good point. And just to add on to that is how we working across the organisation with highways and transport on the routes that they're putting forward. I think that's really important. And yeah, any other cross-organisational, work that we can do.
We do, and obviously we talk to the GCP as well. But yes, we will bring more information back to everyone.
Sorry, I kind of meant not just GCP. I was thinking more like LHIs. There's lots of things we do in highways and transport that can, influence our paths and our roads for children. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bradnam, please.
I'm drawing on my role in the district council as part of the licensing committee. It's just a thought. Has the county council ever considered, in order to address this very difficult bit about the necessary taxi transport for children with high levels of need, have we ever considered setting up an operator unit for private hire ourselves that we could offer, engage drivers and run an operation service ourselves, taxi service?
We do have the voluntary scheme, which does some of our school transport, but I don't know that we've ever considered setting up our own. No, I don't think we've ever considered setting up our own taxi firm as such.
I'm just asking whether we've ever considered it, because actually, okay, I'm sure there are all sorts of complexities to it, but I'm not saying do it from scratch. I'm saying, could we, for example, foster a relationship with an existing small taxi company and take them, as it were, not quite take them in-house, but offer a relationship with them so that we could get these taxi journeys delivered. But it's just a thought. It may not work. It may not be geographically doable, but it's just a thought.
Thank you. I don't know that we have considered it exactly like that, and I think there'll be problems with the procurement rules that we have to follow, which mean that would be tricky. But we are obviously open to considering anything, because as both you and Councillor Goldsack have identified, it is a major pressure for the local authority and something that we are constantly looking at.
The reason I suggest it is because obviously operator, there's drivers, vehicles and operators, and they all have to work under the same licensing regime. But it is a bit of a weird and radical idea, but it just occurs to me there might be some operators who are maybe already doing some of this. And if we could work with them and see whether they could engage with operators elsewhere. I don't know, it's just a thought. I'm just wondering if we can work with them to deliver a more financially sensible arrangement.
I think the complexity is that we deliver almost 12,000 journeys a day one way, so that's probably 24,000 journeys, just under that. I think it is 24,000 journeys every day, and then that's 5 days a week, 36 weeks of the year, however many weeks it is. It's the costs seem incredible, but there is an awful lot of complexity of managing a system. If we were to take on the running of a fleet of transport big enough to manage a proportion of those journeys, then it's a very, very large system that you need to run.
I wasn't suggesting we go straight out big. I was suggesting a pilot in a geographical area that made it sense. If, for example, if we have specialist schools where our young people from Cambridge are routinely being taken to, and that has maybe, say, for example, a large rural catchment, is there something we could do there? It's just a thought, and do it as a pilot first.
I just want to go back to another point. I think just to reinforce what Councillor Goodliff was saying, which is linked to what you're saying, there are a lot of conversations going on with the combined authority. They've been meeting with officers, and there's another more meetings planned for next month as well, to look at possible solutions or where we could work together to reduce those costs and improve journeys for children and young people. So that work is underway. I can absolutely be clear about that. And would never throw the baby out with the bathwater, and would never want to say no to anything where there might be some benefit. So I'll take that away. Thank you.
Councillor Daunton, please.
Yes, I just want to check on the issue of the transport, and not in relation to taxis, in relation to buses. And just to come back to what you were saying earlier, Chair, that we are going to be having a discussion or an information session here, because obviously there'll be some new routes that will either have started or will be coming in the near future. And what impact that will have or might have on home school transport, and then the wider picture in relation to franchising. Sorry?
I'm sorry, could you ask the first part of your question again? I'm so sorry.
Yes. So there are already some new routes being brought in, and what effect, if any, those will have on current home to school transport, and whether that what level of engagement there has been with CPCA in relation to those either current or very near future changes. And then there's the bigger picture in relation to franchising. So I just wanted to be just to because I think I wasn't quite sure what the chair had said in relation to the discussion here.
I don't know off the top of my head whether those new routes will have a direct impact on the home school transport. I would hope that that has been considered and that any routes will have a positive impact, even if it's only minor, but to make some young people's journeys better and quicker and more direct. For work with the combined authority and franchising routes, any conversation about that will involve conversations about home to school transport.
We will have a briefing note which will bring back the pilots that are undertaken and the effect that has had. And we are talking to the combined authority about the franchising and where we see a particular need for bus transport, either in terms of to and from school or indeed allowing young people to attend extracurricular activities and other things other than purely education. But we are having wider conversations about those, yeah. Councillor Coots, please.
Just a small local issue, just to underline here in terms of home to school transport. I'm sure everybody will agree it's vital that communication with parents takes place accurately. There have been one or two slips recently, certainly on my patch. The bus from Soham to Ely was retimed and redirected with the parents not being informed, and so the bus left quarter of an hour earlier than everybody's expecting, which was a bit of a problem. So just really underlining the need for communication on those matters.
Thank you. Is that everyone? We don't actually vote on this item. We've just been asked to scrutinise the risk management report, which I think we have done. So the final item on the agenda, thank you, Dee. The final item on today's agenda is item 6, the committee agenda plan, training plan, committee appointments and local authority school governor appointments. Tamar, do we have any changes to the published agenda plan, please?
Actually, circulated an updated agenda plan yesterday to the committee. So, and that includes any recent changes.
Thank you. Any comments? Nope. Any comments on the committee training plan? Sorry, Councillor Sharp.
Yeah, I didn't apologize. I didn't see the updated plan from yesterday, but it's the point I made earlier in the previous comment. I certainly understood there was a request from Audit and Accounts Committee for this committee to consider that internal audit report. I don't know if it's formally gone through the channels, but certainly our last Audit and Accounts Committee about a month ago.
We are intending to bring safety valve, aren't we? I can't remember which report it comes under, Martin.
We'll be bringing safety valve. There's an update scheduled for November, but I don't know whether that involves that. Whether that's a separate issue, if we've been directed from another committee. It's the same. Okay.
Any other comments on the training plan? Anyone who hasn't signed up and can sign up for the trauma training, I would recommend it. It's possibly the best training I've ever had. And finally, we're asked to note the local authority school governor appointments made between April and July this year. And as always, I'd like to place on record my thanks and the committee's thanks to all of our school governors for the incredible work that they do to support our schools and communities. We are very grateful. And if anyone knows anyone else they can strong arm into being governor, please do so. That brings us to the end of today's business. We next meet on Tuesday, the 8th of October, 2024. I declare this meeting closed. Thank you.